Well, thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to take about five to 7 minutes. I'm going to run through some background information. I feel like I'm kind of loud. Some background information on sort of where we're coming from, our team, and then I'm going to introduce Northen, and then Paul, and then we're going to open it up for discussion. So today we're here to talk about how wood and cities interact. We really believe that urban centers have a huge potential to showcase, experiment, innovate, and drive the kind of demand that we're talking about. I'll come back to this slide. Most of you would have received this in an email yesterday, but there's some key questions and ideas about why it's important that we address cities as one of the building blocks of this conversation. For example, I'm guessing many of the bank branches, if not all of them, are in a city of some magnitude. So it's just one example of, and Northen's work and others here would just, cities are where this conversation is really taking place. So quick background. So we're here representing both Cities for Forests and Wood at Work, and those are two networks that our team have co-founded. Paul has been part of the Wood at Work community of practice for years. Cities for Forests was co-founded with the World Resources Institute about 4.5 years ago. These are, in both cases, groups of practitioners coming from different sectors, different disciplines, who have, by gathering together, decided to work together and innovate together. It's very important that we think of that as a sort of this loop where people are out there practicing, they're working in the fields, and then they take time to come together, which is what we're doing right here, and share that knowledge. So I think this is a great microcosm of exactly what this diagram is showing, from government sector, from industry, from research, etc. Cities for Forests is now, I think, almost 100 cities worldwide who have all committed to some kind of forest activity at the inner, nearby, or faraway forest level. And that's relevant to this conversation. By the way, you're sitting on two benches that were made from timber from a sawmill that is less than a kilometer from here, and from trees that are inside of the Copenhagen municipal boundaries. So this is an example of urban wood from the nearby, for the inner forest. The nearby forest would be within a few hundred kilometers. The faraway forest could be the tropical forest that Timon was speaking of. And so this is important for cities to think of forests in these scales. Wood at Work has been meeting for years, and we've often done field trips to timber buildings. So we definitely think of things from the micro to the macro in our community of practice, from furniture to large buildings, always trying to keep abreast of what's actually happened so we can see real built examples, but also the speculative work, and in every case thinking about the relationship to forests. Most of you here are doing this, what we did in this rendering, which is just kind of illustrating how many different kinds of uses of wood there are in cities, from interior finishing, floors and doors, for example, for the bank, but of course these major structures now with practically unlimited heights that we can build out of timber frames. We're really interested in outdoor wood in the landscape of the city, which is the benches and boardwalks and bridges. We've been staying right next to a bridge that looks almost exactly like this here in Copenhagen, which is a tropical hardwood deck. So we look at that deck and we think, the first thing we think is, where did this wood come from? And it doesn't say it on the deck, and we're very much committed to sort of thinking that way about where does it come from. Going through quickly here, we've developed a platform called Sustainable Wood for Cities, which we'll talk about later, but it's through the community of practice, identifying 8 pathways, we call them, for thinking about sustainable wood through a city lens, including certification, social forestry, the species and the grade selection, very much influenced by Paul's work, thinking very specifically about how you specify something that reduces the impact on the forest. Strategic geography is like, where does this wood come from? What's the jurisdictional and regulatory landscape where you're sourcing the wood from? Are some places better than others to source your wood? And the answer is yes. Local urban wood, like we talked about here. The reused wood, that's the whole structure here, is built by a local company that specializes in reclaimed wood, which is, of course, a great and sustainable type of wood to use. High efficiency production is how much wood do you get from your tree? You cut a tree down, and the average is probably somewhere between 30 and 45% of that tree ends up. Paul's looking at me maybe with a different
I'm
number.
sorry.
That's okay.
I am thinking of other things, but I don't mean to
You can share a little bit about that, but like the reality is that only a small part of the tree right now ends up in a long life wood product. A lot of it goes to pulp and paper, biofuels, etc., which you could say are needed sectors, but in terms of the carbon dimension, we really want to look at how to make that efficiency ratio much better so we can get more carbon into long life storage. And then the very last one is net carbon accounting. That will be tomorrow's subject, to think about like how do we actually calculate carbon. We talk about it all the time, of course, and our LCAs are full of comparisons of carbon numbers, but with wood it's extremely difficult to have a authoritative carbon number. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. I think it was you, Mikhail, that mentioned how do we understand where their wood is coming from. And FSC, of course, is a huge player in this regard with ideas of supply chain continuity and working with all of the stakeholders in the supply chain. But the reality is for many cities, even with FSC certified, which is, let's say, the gold standard for certification, you don't necessarily know exactly where the wood is coming from, even still. And so we're always thinking about how to make this relationship more direct, more transparent, right through to the producer, and ultimately be sharing that knowledge and the benefits and the cultural value, all of the attributes between the producers and the consumers of the wood. And I think we can do that both at a micro scale and a macro scale. We have this term conservation timber, which is about like, can timber be a vehicle and a mechanism for conserving forests? We believe the answer is yes. It has to do with volume and sourcing and the cost of the timber and how these lands are managed. I'm not going to go into that in detail. Many of you will talk about it. When we talk about sustainable wood, we think of the impact on the forest. We think about carbon storage. How do you manage and calculate that? We also think about how wood shows up in a city compared to other materials. So there's one thing to try to get an accurate number. There's another thing to say, well, maybe we're working with uncertainties, but compared to the alternatives, even our approximate calculation might be so much better that is an incentive to move forward with innovation. And I'm sure you'll have a lot to share about that. The last of the four, very important, are the social benefits, and that's, you could say it's the cornerstone of all of these, because if you don't have that, you don't have any of these. You don't have a forest, you don't have timber, you don't have, so the social benefits and sharing those are absolutely critical to any of the conversations. I talked about this guide, and so a couple of quick examples. We worked with some small projects, one in Glasgow with a renovation of a historic structure, and their decision to use a particular type of wood, and we used the guide to assess it. It was a eucalyptus product from Uruguay. They had already chosen that, and we worked through it to sort of help them get a sense of what the benefits and downsides of that were. We've worked with some landscape design and production companies for a garden project in Philadelphia, and with the city of Montreal and other cities, evaluating, for example, different options of wood choices for a bench. And this was kind of nice microcosm because they had four materials they were considering, and we were able to use the guide to say, well, thermally modified ash versus kebony, which is a radiata pine from New Zealand, which is treated, versus greenheart, sustainably sourced from Guyana, versus jarrah, which is a plantation, native plantation wood from Australia. Which of these is better? How would we understand that? It's a pretty interesting question. And we use this guide to sort of do that evaluation and help them understand. And not to say that one is necessarily better than another, but with these different pathways, you can see where the benefits start to accrue and help them make a better decision. So, for example, your bank projects in Tanzania, this would be the kind of thing you could potentially use to say evaluate for those doors or other products. And sustainable wood for cities, yeah, it's been used lightly in all of these cities. And I'm going to end there. And now I'm going to quickly just go back to that intro slide, and then I'm going to turn it over to Northen to. So there is this, and So just in a quick nutshell again, we know that the majority of the world's population is living in cities. We know this is where the cultural influence is being concentrated, and looking at the continent of Africa as just an example, and this is of course an area of some of the most intensive growth for cities in the world. We did a calculation a few years ago that there's 235 million new urban homes that need to be built to accommodate the population over the coming 25 years. So that's a lot of housing to be built, and this conversation, I think, is, if we think about that as just one kind of benchmark, we don't have a lot of time to figure out how to do this right, and we're going to have to move quickly, experiment, and I think there's going to be a lot of trust and dialogue involved. So I'm going to now cue up Northen's presentation, which is an incredible real-life example of a city, I would say, from our perspective, jumping in with both feet to say we believe in this idea. We don't have all the perfect answers, but we know enough to move forward. And let's get this queued up here. I think it is right here.
Okay, Scott, thank you for the invitation. I will talk about one project that I am dealing in this time, and I believe that the cities are the most important invention that we have in for humans, and I think we should use this invention to create opportunities for different things. This project that I will show is actually has a long history. It's almost 20 years, and was very controversial because in the beginning it was a competition, and one of the most important offices of architecture won the competition, and the proposal of them was actually to build 2,000 pack houses, hidden houses that sign a kind of stack apartments to 5 floors. The inhabitants of the place didn't accept this solution, and came the crisis, and so the whole project was a bit getting forget. And then after the crisis came a sort of more democratic way of doing plans. The municipality thought that we should have a participation process and evaluate what we did until this time. The evaluation was very important, and in the evaluation they had this document that is translated at Wednesday in the Nelson Mandela Park. And this evaluation concluded in 4 very important departure points. The first point was that the inhabitants, they didn't accept to build 2,000 new homes, and they reduced to 750. So that was the first one. The second one was that the park and the new development should be a unity. They should integrate with each other. And the third thing was that a lot of activities were happening in the park. Most of them cultural activities, and this place is this district is the district which receive a lot of immigrants, and this district has almost 170 nationalities in the place, and they have a lot of cultural expressions that are done in the park. So these expressions should be considered in the planning of the new neighborhood. And the fourth and last one was that the project should enhance the identity of the neighborhood there, of the inhabitants. So I received this commission with these 4 points. And one of the most important things for me was, what is actually identity? I look into the inhabitants, and most of them were coming from Suriname, from Ghana, and some other places. So I start to investigate how is life in Ghana, how is life in Suriname, and this bring my attention to this housing project that is in Suriname, that is called Brownsell Boningen. Brownsell was a researcher that went to Suriname to make a research. Uh, he has a commission of the government, and the commission was to investigate the forest and select material wood to build the foundations of Amsterdam. So the commission didn't go further, and this man decided to use the knowledge to build houses in Suriname. And he created a kind of prefabricated houses in wood that we what called the Brownsell Woningen, Brownsell houses, and they did a lot of now types. You can see here the types, the Favorite, the Carioca, and was one of the most important things for me was that the ground floor was smaller than the other floors. And I tried to find out why was that. And the reason was that of ground floor, the whole social activity was taking place. The kitchen and the dining was on the ground floor, and around there was tables and places to work, places to meet. So I thought the relation public space with private space was very important. If we look to this district actually is one of the most important experiments in urbanism. In the 70s, there was this kind of honeycomb that was actually big flats of almost 11 floors. And they built a new city in some couple of years. The project actually was a consequence of the modernist ideas of Le Corbusier and that. And what happened with the project is that they didn't build all the ideals that were placed in, like facilities, schools, and then it started to deteriorate and cause a lot of social problems. So around the 90s, they decided to demolish most of them. And they demolished a lot of these flats, and they built a new kind of urbanism that was actually to build very dense neighborhoods with low high density. And so the history of this place is that the statements in urbanism were always very strong. We will do this in once, and we will demolish this in once. But also we have in this time some challenges like sustainability, climate change, circularity, and the social and economical problems. So all these things made me think that we could answer. And I was looking to Denmark, and I found this project from Henning Larsen that was actually a neighborhood built in wood. So for me, was the precedence of my investigation, the Brownsell Boning, the robust urbanism, the challenges that we have about climate change. So let me think, okay, we should build a robust neighborhood that answers these problems, that deals with the identity of the neighborhood and deals with the cultural issues that we have. So I have a statement that we will build the first neighborhood completely in wood in Amsterdam. Looking to Amsterdam, we see that there are some experiments and of the level of the building. Many architects and developers are building actually in wood. That is also something that we should consider. And the plan is very simple. The plan is taking in consideration a route that is actually the accessibility to the place, but is related with a zone that is actually the meeting place between park and the neighborhood. The whole zone is a kind of ecological connection in a big scale. And what we try to do is actually build along the park and along the neighborhood this lively thing that we find in the Brownsville Boningen. So we said that the ground floor should be the place where the life occurs. But building with wood also asks to think about the level of the plans, the floor plans, the level of the building block, and the level of the whole plan. So we make a lot of effort on trying to reconcile these three scales. And we were working with grids that we tested with some architects that are dealing with wood, and we set up the plan in a grid system that is the master plan. These are the different sketches that we did with the architects to find out what is the best organization of the plan, because we work with a material that is mostly orthogonal. We have straight walls and columns and beams, and we should put a program there inside for 720 houses. So we have to deal with a kind of grid and look at the apartment sizes. The policy of Amsterdam is that we should build social housing. 40% of the all plans should be social housing. 40% should cost median income, median salary, the middle salaries of people, and 20% is to put it in the mark. But also we talk with the inhabitants, and they have some kind of requests. Like, for example, we were testing, this is a housing that is also available if the grandmother or the grandfather will live there. We can create an additional place with one entrance. Or a couple that is divorced, that the woman is living in one place and the man in the other place, but the kids are joining together. So we start to analyze different types of floor plans. And we also look at the flexibility, because we couldn't manage all the plans. So we thought that the plans that we are doing should be very flexible. And then came actually that we will work with beams and columns. And this is the ground floor, where every block will receive actually a function that is not housing, like work functions, some social activities. But every block has some place that is reserved to make this livable ground floor. The master plan, and also in the plan we have some ambitions of sustainability. Every block will receive a water garden on ground floor, that we will receive the water from the roofs, and we distribute through the columns to the ground floor. That the relation with the park was very important, and we always said that the public space is the living room of the inhabitants. So we open the possibility of doing balconies, galleries, and a lot of themes. These are the four principles. We will build and nature. Building and nature are one thing. The wood should be visible, a visible material. That is one thing that we will challenge architects, because mostly of the wood projects in Amsterdam are the structure, and outside is glass and other materials. We ask to use any wood building system. We will be free to architects and developers, but living comfort is very important. Of ground floor, we are asking to have a ground floor that is higher enough to deal with these new functions. So 450, is that possible in wood? We think that is possible, but you have to manage also to have floors above. And we have three scales of the level of the neighborhood. The whole neighborhood should appear that is a wood neighborhood. The differentiation we will do on the level of the block, and what is important, the details, because it's a park that is very sinuous, that has round forms. In the details, we will work actually these lines of curves, and that is the request that we will put in what we call building envelopes to the architects. And this is the presentation, and I think we are working now with the housing corporations and some organizations that are dealing with schools and so on. So that is
That's great. Thank you so much, Northen. Can I add a little bit about our relationship with Amsterdam? So we met Northen through one of the directors of sustainability for the city when we, at some point, I can't remember when, approached the city with a request to do a partner forest program, which I might have mentioned briefly. Northen was brought into our initial workshop with the city with this project, and quite quickly we looked at this balcony structure as an opportunity to bring in a tropical partner forest conservation timber from a community forest management location somewhere in the world. So the city did sign on to the Partner Forest program, which was excellent, and that has led to several projects emerging. One is a park bench project, which will experiment with lesser-known species in the city infrastructure. The other is a bridge project on this site, which actually connects an existing waterway on the property to this housing. You can see it in the right there. And then the other was the actual housing itself with this multi-story building and the balconies, which, according to Northen's program, are going to be visible, and it's going to be this very outward expression of wood. Now, where that became extremely exciting for us is thinking about the composition of timber from different sources as it makes up city projects. So when we think about mass timber, we're primarily nowadays thinking about softwoods, although there are definitely hardwood projects that are happening, and we visited one in London a little while ago with European beech. But it's high volume, right? So when you're dealing with a large structure, it's high volume. But when you're dealing with natural tropical forest products, you're dealing with low volume, higher cost, much more specificity on sourcing. So looking at that dialogue between a lower volume material and then was very exciting to us. So we are excited to be working with you on this project, and we'll see where it goes.
Maybe I should add something that actually the question of this roundtable was how cities can incentivize the use of wood. I think I can, through my experience with this project, I will say that it's very important the history behind. It's not the product itself. The history behind convince people to do it. And the history that we built through the investigation in Suriname, through the robust urbanism, was more important than the product itself. The second thing is that the city has the capability of scaling up. And that is something that is for the first time done in Amsterdam and in the Netherlands. We will scale up because architects and developers are building buildings in wood. And but of this level, social housing was not done. And the third thing is that I am not doing alone this. I work every time in workshops with the architects of the housing corporations, the corporations and the builders. So every step that I am doing is in close collaboration. We can, before the municipality used to do a kind of building envelope, everyone was closed timber, and then give to developers, and the architects should answer. But this time is let's learn with each other how we can do. And the fourth one is the most important. We will try to build a library with this project, a library in which we are asking architects to be innovative, to be creative, to be flexible, for all experimental.
That's great.
But
What,
one question: they're private developers doing the buildings themselves.
Yeah, at this moment we are working with the corporations, that is one to one, and the 20
Corporations of.
housing corporations.
Okay.
And the second part we will start next year and is developers. But we are learning now how to make these building envelopes that are so flexible, and the idea is that the developers will have a kind of free space on experimentation.
But they are forced to use timber to
Yeah.
get the plot.
They are forced to do with timber. They are forced to do the facades in timber.
Okay.
Otherwise, we have a kind of evaluation.
Okay. So it's a
Item.
competition to
It's
get
a
the
competition.
plot. Okay.
I have a comment to make and a question. There's a lot of wood shown on that picture and many other pictures. In a typical tropical forest, there's maybe 100 species or 80 or 160 species. And if you analyze their characteristics, they come in groups. And my specialty is ones that are durable for outdoor use. But they're different colors. And one barrier that has always occurred was that you can have a basket of species that have technical characteristics so similar that they can work with each other, but then people want them to be all the same color. And that's a tremendous impediment for tropical forest sustainability. And so I'm just interjecting that when you present this, that instead of having a kind of generic presentation of wood is kind of brown, it should celebrate the diversity of the forest with careful technical analysis of compatible species, and also investigations of finishes that work or no finish.
Yeah.
And so
This is very.
Chime in. While we're having this conversation, you've got a big basket of samples. I don't know if it would be worth just bringing a few and putting them out on our table here, so we can be like seeing
just
the thing.
dump them on the
Because
table.
Go ahead, Stefan.
Yeah, just across the bridge there is a producer of airport furniture, and they are just introducing their biodiversity series
Yeah.
of furniture, where they say we take the species that we find, and it will have the colors that it has, and this will sort of be a marketing idea to use the natural mixture of colors.
Yeah. Peter Pinchot
Yeah.
has a company in Ecuador
Okay.
that is doing the same
Yeah.
thing, and this is, from my perspective, absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
I think, Paul, you are correct. I think
Just put it right in the middle there, Timon.
also from our analysis of the district, when I say that the inhabitants in this district are almost 170 nationalities,
Right. Yeah.
we are talking about diversity.
Yeah.
And if you look at the references that I have, I am talking about different colors and different materials, and because we will like to enhance diversity, but also create common ground, and the common ground is the ground floor.
Yeah.
And Paul, you'll be pleased to know that as we work together on the partner forest side, that will be one of our priorities, is depending on where the wood is coming from to get a good representation. Thais.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment more also on the supply chain. So how you organize the supply chain. You just mentioned that it can be quite challenging because you go into a forest and then you need to find there are small volumes for certain particular wood. The thing is that I think that we need to shape the market also and try to find ways, and exactly this goes through the biodiversity aspects and how you work with a set of woods with same physical properties, But I think that it's important that we can think of these solutions and the scaling it up. So from my perspective, if we cannot make this public policy, if we not can make this, we scale this up, we will continue to have small cases that will allow us to tell nice stories, but won't really allow communities to live on that. And so finding out what is the way, and I think it's very much and going into communities, going into forest concessions and see what is the best way that you can have a long-term supply of wood from that forest, and the way that these different types of wood can serve the construction sector, what are the functions, what are their applicabilities, so that we can have a long-term solution is the way to deal with this issue of volumes. And the other aspect I would like to mention is that, of course, the conservation timber concept associated to tropical forests is very important because we know that the sustainable wood is one of the most valuable, perhaps, marketable assets from a tropical forest. So we know that communities actually can receive very significant benefits from that. Therefore, we need to find ways of making them to be entitled to receive it. But at the same time, I think we should never forget the possibility also of silviculture and tropical silviculture in supplying this market. So I think that there are two different markets, and if you really want to mainstream sustainable wood in the construction sector, I think that there are the markets for the natural forests and the sustainable harvesting of natural forests, but we also need to consider the interactions with silviculture.
That's a great,
I agree
great
completely.
point, Thais. And just to reinforce that, well, the idea of volume, for example, of large timber frame compared to say something like a balcony structure, something that's probably a 20 to 1 or maybe 30 to 1 ratio volume. I'm actually thinking of Tanzania as you're talking, Thais, and thinking about the forest composition. The Tanzania is one of the African countries that's going to be growing, like we talked about, and where, for example, the wood could come from. Is there a silviculture national level plan for just growing trees in volume to serve the coming demand at this point in time?
Yes, of course. For example, we have got a very deficit of hardwood. Hardwood timber is there's so minimum there because people have been cutting trees all over, and they didn't plant any trees to replace those which have been cut. So now there's a pressure for people to plant more trees so that we can have to replace those which have been deforested. So the policy now of the country is to encourage people to plant more trees so that we have no scarcity in the future. So that is the policy. Yeah. That's why. But softwood, there are plenty, but hardwoods they are very minimal. And there's a problem, in construction sector to use timbers. For example, softwood, they are much attracted for termites, so we don't treat well, so that we can use the trees for wood for construction. So that's the problem, termites.
So this would be a general, for a tropical context, the faster the tree is growing, typically the softer the wood is. So there's a kind of challenge between the speed of production and the type of wood that would be most appropriate to build. Then, of course, treatments can be one of the solutions. Also, detailing. Some of the architects here are very familiar with that, just keeping things off the ground. Maybe the first floor is concrete, for example, and the next 3 floors are wood to keep the termites away. I do want to come back to the city's question, which is underlying this, and like thinking about where do cities intervene, where do cities create policies or certain kinds of demands. Um, as you mentioned, transforming the market. Like, I think this is a great example that you've shared, Northen. So, go ahead, Paul.
Just as a kind of mind game, but I think it also could be instituted as a policy that when a city is considering construction, to literally take off the table all of the standard materials, whether they be pressure treated wood or concrete, just simply those are not available, and then ask for, now you're in the forest, what do you do? Here are the characteristics and so on. I think that there's so many default decisions that get made in urban settings where the assumption is that what's already been done is the way to do it. And one other quick correlation is cities should be paying attention to how wood is used in the country that they're expecting to get the wood from, how they're used in construction. A lot of houses are made in Guyana, for example, out of wood. Well, so there is that other thing of just, well, if we're going to get the wood from this location, how are they using it? And use that to inform some of the designs decisions.
You'll be pleased to know that that is going on here with one of our partners who will join us tomorrow, Sitze. He's lived and worked in Suriname for many years, so he's been back and forth with looking at these typologies and the wood species and so forth. But go ahead, Mikhail.
Yeah, considering how cities can drive the use of wood, there's also the question of livability, how it feels to live in a building. We've got an area built only with timber houses in Aarhus here in Denmark. And after they were built, after some years, the architects went back and did a survey of the people that lived there and found out that the people who lived in the wooden houses were actually happier with where they were living than people living in other types of buildings. So there's this idea that as a contractor, it's easy, it's relatively easy, it's relatively quick to build in concrete and steel, but you're sort of building little prison cells for people. Whereas when you build in wood, you have a place that's nice to be in, and you can't really write it down in an Excel spreadsheet until you've lived in a wooden house, and you'll sort of get the feeling. And once people understand that mindset, that can help drive the use of timber. Some people even accept, at least in Denmark, paying an additional price for a wooden house because they feel that it'll be like it's nicer to live there, both for them and for their children.
One thing that was, I think it's very difficult to go with one paradigm to the other.
To shift, you say,
yeah,
the mindset.
We are very well in building with concrete. We have an history of 100 years of building concrete. All developers, architects know how to deal with concrete. And when I went to Suriname, I told them that about this project, and the people said that we don't like wood. We would like to have a brick house because it's a status. So we have a lot of work to do that has to be about consciousness. Not just that wood is a nice place to live, but consciousness about the problems that we have. This project took me a long time to convince inside the municipality to colleagues, because colleagues say the first time that I proposed this, you are crazy. We will not do that. But constantly, telling the history, convincing people needs a lot of effort for us. There are some pioneers like work is doing, but all the other architects, all the other developers wants to build in a traditional way. And we've had to shift this. And how we do that is showing that we are doing nice things, that we are working with everybody, that is a kind of consensus between the people who is building the cities. And that will take a long time. Maybe in Sweden it's more easy because it's a tradition, but in other places it's very difficult.
Yeah, but basically the decisions on what materials to use in the property development is either the city, because the city owns the land or has control over what will be built in one way or another, or it is the developer. And to convince cities that they should demand from the contractors or the developers to use timber is more of a political, cultural issue. But when we have to convince the developers that they should use timber, it's basically a financial issue. And of course, there is on the demand side, there is a possibility to inform people, to tell people this is nice, you'd like to live in a timber building.
Maybe
But
pay
basically,
more
it
for
has
it
to do
even.
with the banks and the financial institutions.
So from a developer's point of view, you would have the, the net profitability, which would include both the consumer side, or what are people willing to pay, and then you have all the cost factors
Right.
like insurance, like additional manufacturing costs, or
And on the risk,
construction risk.
because you don't know what you're doing.
Risk. Just aside from insurance, risk as a
Yeah,
project.
I mean, if you have a bunch of guys knowing how to build a concrete building,
Right.
and you put a piece of timber in their hands, will they get it right?
Right.
But
Thais, and then
Well, yeah,
Go ahead,
well,
Henrik.
just two
Yeah,
things.
go ahead.
One thing is we've actually got a big construction company in Denmark that has been building concrete houses or buildings for many years, and they're moving to CLT now. So instead of firing all the concrete workers and bringing in carpenters and builders, they're retraining all of their personnel to
absolutely.
mount the CLT elements.
which is quite simple.
Yeah, and apart from that, another thing, particularly with timber housing, is we need to have the architecture and the engineering go hand in hand, because there are so many issues. Everybody has heard about someone who's lived in a house where there was fungus or insects or what have you, termites in Africa. And so there are structural solutions, structural protection that needs to be integrated into the building, because it's been seen too many times that people are just moving ahead going, okay, this looks nice, and then the preservation of the building wasn't thought in. For example, now there's a Danish company called WoodSense that makes sensors that you put into strategic places in the building, and then when the walls or the slabs or what have you, the wooden elements start absorbing humidity and become more moist than they used to, they'll send out a signal by Wi-Fi, and you can go and check, and often it's like there's a hole in the roof, or a water pipe has broken, and then you can go and repair it before it starts creating fungal damage. So those are kind of solutions that we can bring into modern buildings.
Yeah, I think there is a key aspect. There is a mind shift that needs to happen. And there is a lot of prejudice against wood. There are prejudice from people who live in cities who think that wood is an inferior material, that it's not worth it, or some that think it's too expensive. And in developing countries, really, as it was mentioned, wood's the material of the poor, is what you use when you don't have anything else you don't have any money to afford concrete or steel buildings. But I think that on the basis of all this prejudice is the fact that you have the concrete industry, the steel industry, the glass industry. They have a very streamlined, harmonized supply chain.
Yes.
So if you say, I'm going to develop a product for the city, steel, concrete, etc., you have a lot of players, you know exactly how to cost it, you know completely already set up process to do it. When you're talking about wood, this is still, we are not yet there. And I think that one of the things that we need to do is, first of all, regulation. Not all, here in Europe, of course, I think most of the municipalities have already upgraded regulation, have updated the regulation to recognize the current technological status of wood, but in many countries this is still to happen. I think we need also to have more important communication from the industry and from the architects, or those who are interested in advancing with wood, on demystifying or how technology has addressed past issues, exactly like humidity or fungus or fires, etc. And the third thing is really working with the industry, because the industry needs to find way of harmonizing this and what this industry wants to be about.
Yeah.
Because if cities need to depend on making a contact with a specific forest country or a specific forest community to supply for this product, this is not going to happen. This is going to happen on niche markets. It will continue to be a niche market. So if you want this to be a global market, there is a part that the private sector is still to deliver. There is how to make it easy to supply, residential infrastructure projects with wood at global scale. And this needs to involve also the producing countries, because if we keep this at the niche market level, we cannot scale it up. No one make policy for niche markets. You make policy for global solutions.
And you have to make the global market with 160 species,
Exactly.
which is a challenge.
Yes.
And
But-
crossing over between plantation and natural
Yeah.
forests and
What
in
you're
between.
saying is absolutely important, that it is the people who deliver, I mean, the people who install is very important, the people who produce, but it's the people in this supply chain that deliver need to be the revolutionaries. And part of that has to do with banking, it has to do with consciousness of carbon, where there are the comparison between certain kind of wood technologies and concrete and steel technologies, and the superior benefits of wood from a carbon perspective, and that needs to be understood by the banking industry, and so I don't know how to do that. I'm not in that world, but I see it as in this tiny part of that world that I inhabit. I have always worked with people who were either self-financing or they were doing enough concrete and steel projects that they could self-finance, but that intermediate sector has to be well financed and insured, and all the things that make commerce work smoothly.
And we need the architects
You
to
had a
sex
you had a
architecture.
comment. Sorry,
Yeah.
I can't read your name tag from here. Can you say your name again?
Hannah.
Hannah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add some things about what I face today in the Netherlands, actually, about using wood in constructions. And I think one important part is the detailing, of course, because nowadays everybody knows how to do it with concrete and steel, and the details is open sources, basically. You can share everything. And as soon as it becomes into the wooden details, then everybody wants to be pioneers in actually doing it, and also a bit more afraid of sharing the details. So I think that sharing knowledge polish is really a thing which we all need to do together. Second part is actually to get the clients, the developers, and I had a third part, which I now forget, to really be part of working sustainability. And there's a lot of question. And what I realized in the Netherlands is also that maintenance of actually how the wood will be, and how often do they actually need to do something, and how the weather will affect the color of the wood is really a thing. And most of the clients are actually like, yeah, but then I need to put on some color every year. And with bricks, I don't need to do things in years. So I think that's also, we need to give people the knowledge that then, of course, the natural material will transform itself over the years. And that's actually a nice part of the wood, my opinion. But yeah.
Just one thing to Hannah, that I mean, to have timber on the facade is quite different from having a timber structure, so you can mix materials. And I understand that timber facades are really unpractical in wet climates, for example.
I just wanted to add
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
even when it's wood construction, I think we still have a bit to go to really get the wooden going in the Netherlands. That's what I'm facing every day. And that's also most of the times the cost actually of, and that people are not aware of what of a sustainability impact will it actually have to do it in wood instead of and also the knowledge of people who is actually going to build the buildings.
If you allow me, I want to point at one element that I think is very important.
Yeah, go ahead.
We are always talking top down, and that is the wrong thing. Actually, I believe that the meeting top down and bottom up is very important. If we don't put together these two things, we will not do anything, because it's very difficult for people to understand that building with wood has to do with carbonize. This is a language that normal people doesn't receive. We always talk on some level that doesn't touch the normal user, and I think that is very important. And to the experience of this project, I have to make a plan for 580 housing for Ukrainian people in 3 months. What we did is we talked with the immigrants there and with Ukrainian people, and they told us the histories that they have. And because it was a temporary building, they were very small buildings. So, and I thought, okay, we can do very fast if we do in wood. So we reunion 3 housing corporations, 3 architects, 3 builders, and we make workshops together. And we became with a plan, and the plan is in 3 months ready, and we will build this housing. But how we did it? I said, this is a neighborhood that is a lot of poor people. They have to use the car to go very far to work. And maybe we should also do something about this woodwork for the people who lives in the place. And how we do that? Bringing knowledge. There are a lot of young people here that could help to build this housing. So what we are doing now in this district is we are building a technical school where people will learn there. And if we don't meet these social needs, economical needs with what we are doing from top down, we will not succeed. And I think that is very important.
Thais, go ahead and jump in.
Thank you. I think this is a very good observation. It's one side, but I think this is one side of the coin. There is another side that is the consumer. The consumer likes everything that works. That's how innovation actually get picked up and really becomes, a set product. So we are now at the phase that it's all about pilots still. I think apart from Sweden, and it's still a novelty. But people are starting to realize whether those buildings are good, they feel comfortable, they are warmer or better insulated, or fresher, warmer or fresher, better insulated, and whether they are affordable, the beauty of it. And this is something that needs to be disseminated. I'll tell a very petty story about that. A policeman, a British policeman, it was a meeting that had nothing to do with with wood or forests, came to me and said, he heard about what I did, and then he said, I bought a wooden house. And I just bought it because my wife insisted and I needed to buy it, and we got it. And the thing is that he lives in Midlands, England, and he says, I don't turn on the heater anymore.
Wow.
Because they built it with a technology that has the right angles, and there is a reutilization of the actually human warmth, and he doesn't turn on the heating anymore, meaning that
This
has
is in the UK, where
a
there's
wow
like a crisis
factor.
of
So this guy is an advocate for wooden buildings now. And basically because he's a consumer. He knows nothing about forests. He knows nothing about the wood markets. But he's a consumer, very satisfied with his product. And I think that we need to work with this consumer satisfaction factor. What are the bills that are going to go down? what's the level of energy efficiency, how this will affect your daily life, and in a harmonized way, because again, not niche. We need to know how is a harmonized policy. Thank you.
Paul, do you want to just jump in and
Yeah,
I can
sure.
just quickly run through these
Yeah.
slides and
Well,
and
not
then we'll
too
keep.
quickly.
Okay, you're at your pace.
So this is a project in Boston. The city of Boston, with enormous resources, has been redeveloping South Boston, which was very industrial and warehousing and so on. And so this is a commercial pier. This is just one short section of it. This is a rendering that I grabbed from the architect's drawings, and this involves. The whole project is $990 million, and it's a small part of the whole development, which is literally trillions of dollars. So this is the power of cities. And so this particular pier has about $1 million worth of wood, and my company was tasked to supply that wood. And what I did was to take that opportunity and add onto it a conservation and forest sustainability issues, and also worker training issues. I didn't have to do that. It's not normal that that's done, but I decided this was a great opportunity to do it. And that opportunity came to me because of the pandemic, which stopped all construction, made a mess of every schedule, etc. And then what I and many other people refer to as the greedflation that occurred after the opening of the economy, where all of a sudden everything became expensive. And this locked a lot of installation contractors into these horrible contracts where they had to perform. And one of them came to me and said, "Can you save us money on this? Because we're going to go broke. Big company. We're going to go broke doing this." And so what we did, and you can do the next slide. What we did, and this is a little hard to read in a slide, but what we did is to take a look at the architecture plans, and the architecture plans were putting wood decks in many configurations, and the total amount of decking was 1,707 lineal meters of wood. So this is a huge amount of wood. And what we did was to take the architectural plans and count every single piece of wood that was and where its locations were. And then we took that information and went to a capable mill in Brazil. The normal procedure is they just order a pile of wood and they haphazardly put it in, and then they throw a whole lot in the dumpster. But we took to the mill and said, look, this is what we need. We know when you cut trees and make products out of it that the tree is a random number generator which has certain lengths, and so you do your best to the highest level of fiber utilization, and we will create a dynamic spreadsheet that comes from our approximation, and as you tell us what you're making, we will adjust the number of pieces and where they go. And then finally, as they were ending their production run, we said to them, and by the way, we can take every single piece you make down to 55 centimeters, and that's like this long. And this is a total miracle in the typical way in which timber is distributed. And so all of this happened. We put this in. This was FSC Forest. We put it in sealed containers, so it went very efficiently to the consumer. And when they started to install it, instead of just saying, "Okay, put some piles of wood on the concrete deck and start installing it," what we did was make drawings like this, which is keyed to the container number, it's keyed to the pallet number, and each piece of this wood. So that the project manager can say, all right, for this week we need to get this and this and this pallet from this and this container and bring it to this location. And this is a very small section of it, but what we did was to make the installation so that you're not there to make mistakes and try to correct them. It's like you have a pallet that's got 2-foot-long pieces. They go where the 2-foot-long pieces go, and so on. And this is not the first time we have done this. And so the idea here was to take an existing structure that had a kind of financial flexibility to overbuy the wood and a financial flexibility to overpay for the installation and make it much cheaper. That's how we solved the economic problem. We saved at least $80,000 on the wood bill. And I'm not, they don't share this with me, but when the production manager says to me, well, you know, we were really having struggle. This was a previous project. We were really struggling to get the productivity we needed for the installation, and that's when. And then we started making this kind of drawing. And he called me up the week later. How's it going? He said, well, we're going twice as fast now. And so I'm guessing we probably saved at least another $80,000 on the installation cost. There's no big pile of wood in the forest of little pieces that nobody wants. There's no dumpster that's filled with pieces of wood. So this method, we just modified an existing system that we knew had slack. We took some of the economic benefit, but the construction company all of a sudden had a whole management liability taken off their heads. They saved a lot of money on labor, and we did our small part to reduce waste. But it's also a teaching tool. The mill, first of all, was, oh yeah, we can do what you're asking. And then it was, can we do more of this? Can you send us other projects like this? So the next slide. So, I'm not being sarcastic or joking here. The top picture is a typical, that's a typical yard in a production mill in Latin America, and then below you have a typical construction site where God knows what goes where, and there's always a huge pile of dumpsters that's kind of solve that problem. And so our focus has been to look at the end product and the beginning original product and see how to stop wasting wood. Not for this project, but for other projects, we would look at that pile and see there's probably 20 species in there. We would have, not at this stage, but earlier before the logs were cut, we would have looked at how do we use different species. So next one. These are not one-off things. These are, like for example, in the upper left-hand corner, that project has decking, siding, furnishings, doors, and so on, all made of wood. This was people excited about having wood, the decking was specified in Ipe, and the siding was teak. And I decided to go have a meeting with the architect and the financiers. And I said, you're blowing at least $750,000 on thinking that that's how you want to do this. So we're going to get rid of the Ipe, we're going to use Kumaru, and then we're going to go to Guyana where we can get FSC wood, and we then used Angelique instead of teak. I mean, to the average person, it looks the same, but the Angelique was about 15% of the cost of the teak. And so this is a kind of conversation with the people who have power, which are the people who have the money. And if you can demonstrate to them that they are not going to get an inferior product, they're not going to have insurance liabilities, and so on and so forth. So that project on the left is wildly successful from a developer's and financial point of view. It was one of the earlier projects in South Boston. If you go immediately to the right, you can. That's a stock aerial photo. I couldn't find my photos, but all of the decking there was supplied by my company, and you can't really see it in the picture. But I give you a particular example where the city of Boston knew that they had a climate problem, which was rising sea levels. And what they did was to create these very large sections of decking, which were actually barges. They were actually boats. They were built in a boat building factory, and they filled them with concrete. And so they sank, but when a huge storm wave came in, the boat would come up, but it would absorb so much energy in coming up, and they were designed so that the typical storm wave and the frequency of the storm wave, that when it came down again, it was pushing in the opposite direction of the next wave coming in. So these were storm surge barriers. And so but they of course wanted fancy decking on top. And so what we did in that case was to get the specifications, and then we had a mill in Brazil create exactly the lengths they needed, literally to the millimeter. We had another plant drill holes in exactly the places, because all these drawings lots of money are made into these drawings. They're quite specific. And then they put on top of this barge, which was 100 meters long by 20 meters wide, something like that, and they installed this wood. The mill was thrilled because they could use with very high levels of utilization. And one day I walked up there just to look at the work, and I was asked by a gentleman, well, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm the one that supplied the wood. And in typical New England fashion, where they don't really speak very much about very close slip, and I said I want to supply the wood, and then there was this silence. And I was, kind of nervous about it. And then he said to me, the people who did this work must really take pride in their work. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, they do. And he said, and I've never heard this before, because this is perfect.
Wow.
And the joints were and then the next level down, the guy called me up and he said, we had one board left over, which was his. But so this is about really intervening at the inflection points in the construction, where you can make a difference. And so let's just go down to the next one. This is the Institute of Contemporary.
Sorry, here's the situation we're in. We have only a few minutes left.
Yeah, I only have a couple of minutes. Yeah.
But I do want to have they're wanting us to. Okay, so here's what I'm going to suggest. We can migrate to our little corner over here, which they need the stage in a couple of minutes. So those who are willing, we can literally pick up this table and move it over to there, and the whiteboard. And because what I'd like to do, whoever can stick around for another 15 or 20 minutes or longer, is to try to. We've been recording all this, by the way, as well. Is to do some bringing this into recommendations for our city communities. Yes, Thais.
20 seconds. I just want to make a point for us to discuss.
I'm sorry, I don't want to break the conversation.
There is a new expertise here. Yeah. That is the wood planner.
Yes.
There is this bridge between, the forester, the forest engineer, the architect. That is the wood planner. And I heard a similar experience before. Exactly that. The importance of someone who can understand how you decouple a project, and you structure the sourcing according to that project, but this is a new expertise. There are very few professionals available today that
Paul
can
is
make
such
that.
an expert in this, and Paul, maybe
and it works. It makes people money, and that's really the thing that makes it work.
Paul, your expertise, which you've built over decades and decades of work, going between the forests themselves and all of the different steps in the value chain. Transferring that knowledge and expanding it into this, actually want to put that on the whiteboard, which is defining a new, I think you put it so well, responding to what Paul is sharing, which is defining a new category of expertise, which is which is specific but recognizes that entire value chain. It's like, let's maybe come up with a name for that amongst us. Wood planner. That's
You know
great.
what? I like that name. I like that name.
But to be honest, this is a bit different from your approach that is more of like standardizing and to have a... No?
I can explain, but no.
Okay.
I noticed everyone's leaving to carry the table.
Well, we're going to take the table over there, and
know?
we're going to carry it over.
But we have to start with
You-
the bench here.
I
Yeah.
think we can. I'm going to close
this first?
this. Can we hear each
No,
other
not
if we go mic free? Is that okay?
Mic's off?
Yeah. Okay. So, well,
Yeah.
you can't have one without the other.